Her daughter laughed when her husband said, "Frances should have stayed home." She didn't flinch. She buttered her cornbread, served the guests, and said nothing. But by Monday morning, the house they were mocking her in was no longer theirs. Frances had stayed silent for years. Now the deed, the title, and the law were all speaking for her. And when they begged for 30 days to pack, she gave them exactly what they gave her: none. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The sun had dropped just low enough to scatter gold across the water, painting the lake in rippling streaks of amber. Laughter rose up from the dock where kids tossed rocks and dared each other to cannonball. The air smelled of mesquite smoke and overcooked brisket. It was, by most measures, a perfect fall evening, except for the tension braided tightly between the ribs of certain adults scattered across the lawn. The lodge was big enough to sleep 16, with a wraparound porch and rental furniture, just expensive enough to suggest someone had something to prove. Inside, caterers in branded polos laid out the last of the charcuterie and kept folding napkins no one would use. But outside, beneath a string of Edison bulbs and a towering cottonwood tree, the real show was already underway. Todd stood near the grill, beer in hand, one foot resting cockily on the edge of a cooler he hadn't lifted once all day. "So," he boomed, his voice slicing through the murmur of small talk, "we all pitched in this year. But let's be honest, Frances should really learn when to stay home. A beat." Then, Haley's laughter, too loud, too fast, poured out of her like she'd been waiting for the punchline all day. She leaned into Todd's side like they shared a secret, swatting his arm as if to scold him, but her eyes sparkled with unhidden glee. Julian, standing off to the side with a sweating glass of lemonade, didn't laugh. His jaw tightened. One hand absently reached for the hem of his sleeve, fidgeting like he used to in 6th grade when his dad criticized his posture during dinner. All around them, the conversation thinned. Plastic forks paused midair. A few glances flicked sideways, some curious, some uncomfortable. Frances sat quietly at the far end of the picnic table, floral dress neat, posture straighter than necessary. She said nothing, didn't even blink, just cut her cornbread clean down the center, buttering each half with exact, patient strokes, as if Todd's words were background noise and not a direct hit meant to humiliate. "Who made the mac and cheese?" someone asked too loudly from the buffet line, desperate to shift the spotlight. But Bishop Clyde, looming near the drink table in his usual charcoal slacks and that never-just-for-style clergy collar, had already heard. His eyes didn't narrow in anger, but in calculation, quiet, surgical. He sipped his tea, gaze fixed on Todd with the calm of someone who'd once baptized that man and now regretted it. The sun slipped lower. Bugs buzzed around citronella candles. Plates were scraped clean. The speakers played an old Motown track that didn't quite match the mood anymore. When the sky finally darkened, and folks wandered inside to argue over board games and caramel apple pie, Frances helped clear plates no one asked her to. Haley disappeared into the upstairs master suite with a bottle of Prosecco. Todd took his usual victory lap in the kitchen, telling the caterers where they'd over-seasoned. Frances slipped out to the porch alone, her phone buzzed softly in her hand, the screen lighting up with a message. "Noreen, they've forgotten whose name was never erased." Frances stared at it. Her thumb hovered. No reply. She looked out over the dark water. Somewhere, a loon called. In the reflection of the porch light, her expression didn't change, but something inside her settled, like a bone snapping back into place. She deleted the message, pocketed her phone, and walked back inside. Julian, halfway up the stairs with a half-finished plate of pie, turned just in time to see her. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Frances gave him a slow, unreadable look, then turned toward the kitchen, where Todd was reaching for a second helping. Monday afternoon sunlight striped across the walnut conference table like prison bars, neat, precise, inevitable. Frances sat with her hands folded, palms down, as if to quiet them. Across from her, Tasha Cole adjusted her glasses and flipped open a manila folder that hadn't seen daylight in 5 years. "I had to dig through my off-site storage," Tasha said, tapping the first page. But you were right. Title was never transferred. It's still in your name. Not Haley's, not Todd's. Frances didn't smile. Not really. But her lips twitched in a way that suggested she'd finally exhaled after a long, tight silence. Utilities are in their name, she said. That's got nothing to do with ownership, Tasha replied. Dry as ever. Paper trail says you bought it, paid in full. You never filed a quitclaim deed. They've been living like owners, sure, but legally, they're tenants, month to month. Frances tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly as if considering that phrase like a riddle to be solved. Tasha went on. If you wanted, you could list the house this week, get a cash offer by Friday, and legally, she flipped the page, tapping again with a fresh manicured nail. They'd have 30 days to vacate. 60, if they made it messy. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside the window, a leaf blower coughed to life, rattling the glass. Frances didn't flinch. I kept waiting for them to ask, she said softly. Even once. But they never did. They just moved in, repainted, put up that god-awful Barnwood sign in the foyer like they were christening a ship. Tasha gave a dry laugh. Let me guess. It says, home is where the heart is? Frances nodded, with a heart instead of the word. Classy. A creak came from the hallway. Tasha's gaze flicked toward the frosted glass door. Frances turned her head slowly. Too late. Julian was already there, standing just inside, holding a jacket he clearly didn't need, his face pale like he'd stepped into a funeral parlor. I'm sorry, he said quickly. The door was open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Tasha closed the folder. Julian walked in the rest of the way, voice low. Did they know? Frances studied him. Her son's hair was still damp from the gym, his sneakers barely tied. He looked tired, or maybe just older than yesterday. They never asked, she said. I just stopped correcting them. The words dropped like stones. Julian sat down slowly in the chair beside her. His hand found the edge of the table, fingers tracing the grain like he needed something solid. I thought they bought you out, he murmured. That's what Haley said. Frances gave a slight shake of her head. No documents, no wire transfers, nothing, just a story they liked better than the truth. Tasha stood. I'll give you 2 a minute. Let me know how you want to proceed. But Frances, she paused at the door. This isn't revenge. It's real estate law. When the door clicked shut, Julian let out a long breath. You're really going to sell it? He asked. Frances looked at him, long and clear. I haven't decided. But I'm not going to let them live in my house while laughing about how I should have stayed home. Julian winced. They're going to lose it, he said. If you go through with this, I know. And Haley? She'll drag you through court if she thinks she can squeeze $1. Frances leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself the smallest smile. Let her try. I kept every receipt, every closing statement, every damn email. Julian stared at her, quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you say anything before? He finally asked. Frances turned toward the window, eyes scanning the orange leaves rustling outside. Because they never thought they had to ask. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. No name, just a number she hadn't saved. But the message was short. You're being watched. Her mouth went still. She locked the screen and slipped the phone into her coat pocket like nothing happened. Ready to go? She asked Julian lightly. He nodded, but something in her face made him hesitate. Something he couldn't name. Not yet. The Zillow alert hit Frances's inbox at 9:06 a.m. A 3-bedroom colonial on Elmhurst Lane, freshly listed. Clean paint, custom tile. Perfect for a growing family, the caption read. Frances clicked it open, brows barely raised. The listing photos weren't even new, just wide-angled versions of the ones she'd taken herself 2 summers ago, when she'd had the kitchen redone. The marble backsplash, the brass pulls. The built-in bench Haley had once called pretentious, now rebranded in the caption as bespoke. She scrolled all the way down to the agent's contact info. Todd's name wasn't anywhere on the page, but the agency? Oh, she recognized it. She stared at the for sale by owner tag for a moment, then closed her laptop. By 9:14, she was on the phone with the brokerage. I'm calling to report a fraudulent listing, she said calmly. The property is mine. I never authorized this sale. A young woman on the other end sounded flustered, typing rapidly. Ma'am, we take these claims seriously. Do you have paperwork to support ownership? I do, Frances said. And so does my attorney. 20 minutes later, Tasha had the cease and desist sent, flagged, and forwarded. The brokerage pulled the listing before noon. No questions, no appeals, no fight. Frances didn't gloat. She didn't text Noreen. She didn't so much as smirk when she saw the broken link to the listing in her inbox vanish with a 404 error. Instead, she brewed herself tea, sat by the window, waited. The call from Todd came at 12:37. I swear to God these systems are useless, he snapped to someone in the background. They let any damn idiot file a complaint. Click. Frances didn't pick up. At 12:58, Haley called. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. Frances, hey, Haley began, too sweet, too breathy. I think there's been a mistake. A really big one? The listing for the house just disappeared, and the realtor says someone filed a fraud claim. Can you please call me? Just call me, okay? She didn't hang up right away. Frances could hear her breathing for another 2 seconds before the line finally clicked off. Frances didn't listen to the message again. She didn't delete it either. She just swiped it into the archive. By 1:22, she was at the kitchen table, laptop open again, this time with intention. Her own listing form, blank and waiting, filled the screen. She started slow. Room by room, square footage, school district, built-in shelving, hardwood throughout. She left the open house section blank for now. She'd let them stew. From the hallway came the soft chime of her phone. Another voicemail. Haley again. No message this time, just silence. A notification popped up on her screen. Noreen. They called your kindness permanent. They forgot paperwork exists. Frances allowed herself a real smile this time. Small, sharp, the kind that knew better. She clicked into the draft and typed a new sentence beneath the seller notes field. Property is vacant at time of sale. It wasn't. Not yet, but it would be. She saved the draft. Then she looked out the window, past the mailbox, past the line of parked cars along the street, and straight across the lawn to where Todd and Haley's mailbox stood like a soldier with a secret. By 2 p.m., she'd submitted the paperwork. Tasha would handle the rest. Frances didn't need to say anything out loud, not yet. That evening, she opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving, let it breathe, played Coltrane softly through the kitchen speaker, and while the rest of them were spinning in frantic circles, trying to figure out which leak had sunk their ship, Frances set the table for one. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. This time, the message was even shorter. You started this. She stared at it, then turned off her phone and poured herself another glass. The morning air had that snap to it, the kind that promised fall wasn't just flirting anymore. Frances stood at the kitchen window, cradling her mug, watching a single leaf tumble down the walkway like it had somewhere urgent to be. Across the street, Todd and Haley's blinds were shut. They'd been shut since the listing vanished. Frances opened her laptop and logged into the private buyer portal Tasha had recommended. No MLS, no open houses, no curious neighbors, just targeted, pre-qualified eyes, and more than a few eager inquiries. She typed the final details slowly, deliberately, clicked submit. No fanfare, just a blinking status change. Active, off-market, private sale. Tasha had said it wouldn't take long. People love a house with a story, she'd murmured, not bothering to hide the smirk. Frances reached into her leather folder and pulled out 2 neatly folded copies of the notice to vacate, both already printed on letterhead. She read each word again, slowly, like a final inspection. 30 days. No legal loopholes. No wiggle room. She slid the letters into Tasha's hands that afternoon, with nothing more than a nod. By Thursday morning, Julian was standing on the sidewalk, pretending to scroll his phone while his stomach turned in slow, sour circles. He saw the mail truck roll up, watched the carrier slide a manila envelope into Haley and Todd's box. And then, he waited. It didn't take long. Todd, wearing sweatpants and fury like a second skin, yanked the box open with one hand while sipping from a Yeti mug in the other. He glanced at the envelope, paused. tore it open. Julian couldn't hear the words, but he saw the color drain from Todd's face. Haley appeared behind him a moment later, barefoot, wearing one of Frances's old cardigans, like armor. Her expression as she read over Todd's shoulder started blank, then confused, then full-throttle nope. Her mouth moved, fast, sharp, accusatory. And then the shouting began. Julian couldn't make out everything, but he caught pieces. She can't do this. It's illegal, right? I knew she was up to something. Get Tasha on the phone, now. Julian stepped back from the curb before they could spot him. He didn't want to be part of the next scene. Frances didn't react when the car peeled into her driveway that afternoon. Gravel crackled beneath Haley's tires like dry bones snapping underfoot. She stepped out without knocking, without looking around, without even closing her door all the way. Her eyes were red-rimmed and glassy, but there was steel behind them. Dangerous, frantic steel. Frances was on the porch, pruning dead leaves from the mums. She didn't look up. Haley marched straight across the yard. You can't do this, she hissed. You cannot do this to your own daughter. Frances placed a wilted petal into the compost bag with surgical precision, then looked at her. I'm not doing anything, she said. I'm just stopping what I allowed. For a half second, Haley's face collapsed. Confusion, wounded disbelief, something that might have been real. But it hardened too fast. Her jaw clenched. You always make yourself the victim, she spat. Even now. No, Frances said softly. That's what you do. A car passed slowly on the street. Haley didn't notice it. Frances did. Bishop Clyde rolled by in his navy Buick, window halfway down, collar visible beneath his coat. He tapped the brim of his hat, once firmly, as he met Frances's gaze. She nodded. It was all she needed. Haley looked over her shoulder as if suddenly aware the world had returned. You really want people to know you put your daughter on the street? Think they'll send you sympathy cards. Frances let the pruning shears hang at her side. I don't care what people send, she said. But I do care who signs the check when this house sells. Haley went quiet. Her mouth open like she had one more threat in her, but nothing came. Just then, Frances's phone buzzed again. She looked down. Unknown, you won the battle, not the war. She didn't flinch. But this time, she didn't turn off her phone either. She turned the screen toward Haley. Know anyone who'd send me this? Haley stared at it. Her face said no, but her eyes said something else entirely. The offer came through at 10:42 a.m., sharp. Full asking. No contingencies, no inspections. Cash. Frances read it twice, her coffee cooling untouched beside her. The buyer's name meant nothing to her. David R. Latham, LLC, but Tasha had already vetted the paperwork. A landlord. Local. Quiet reputation. Known for snatching up homes like this. Solid, suburban, well-kept, with just enough family trauma baked into the walls to make it undervalued. Frances clicked accept. Her fingers hovered over the mouse for half a second, like she was waiting to feel something. Relief, regret, rage. But there was nothing left to feel. Just clarity. The screen blinked. Offer accepted. Closing pending. The notification hit her phone a second later. The ding echoed louder than it should have in the still kitchen. She walked to the window. Across the street, the house looked smaller than it used to. Not physically, but spiritually. The lawn was browning. The shutters needed painting. She hadn't noticed that before. At 11:15, Tasha called. They've got 2 weeks, she said crisply. Buyer wants to take possession before month end. I sent the updated notice. Frances simply replied, thank you. By 2, Julian was standing in the hallway of Frances's house, holding a grocery bag full of lentils and trying to decide if he wanted to say anything. The knock came before he made up his mind. Frances didn't move from the kitchen table. Can you get that? She asked quietly. Julian opened the door. Haley stood there, sleepless, furious, somehow both unwashed and overdressed, her voice already cracking before she spoke. I need to talk to her, she said. Julian didn't step aside. Haley tried again. Please, Julian, just convince her to wait. Just 30 days. That's all I'm asking. Julian looked down at the bag in his hands, then back up at his sister. She gave you 30, he said. We didn't know she was serious, Haley snapped. We thought it was a bluff. Yeah, Julian said. That's the problem. She tried to shove past him. He didn't budge. You always take her side. No, Julian said evenly. I just stopped taking yours. Haley's mouth opened, furious, disbelieving, but Julian shut the door before she could answer. He walked back to the kitchen and set the groceries down on the counter. Frances was still seated, elbows on the table, pen in hand. Her listing paperwork rested neatly beside the offer contract, initials already inked. She'll come back, Julian said. Probably tonight. Frances didn't look up. I know. Todd showed up at dusk. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch like a summons waiting to be read aloud. Frances stepped outside without speaking. She left the screen door half open behind her. Todd looked worse than she expected. Slumped shoulders, sweat-stained polo, a kind of aimless heaviness in his eyes, like someone who'd run out of manipulation and only just discovered the limits of charm. You're gonna be remembered for this, he said finally. Frances looked at him, steady. Maybe for once, she said. Accurately, Todd shifted his weight, looked away. This isn't who you are. Frances tilted her head, as if weighing the phrase like an object she'd never held before. No, she said softly. It's who I've always been. You just preferred the version that paid for your gutters. Todd's face crumpled into something like a wince, but he didn't answer. He walked off the porch without another word. Frances didn't watch him go. She walked back inside, locked the door, and slid the bolt across. Tasha called at 6:37 p.m. All signatures received. Deal's final. Closing in 10. Frances nodded into the phone. Tell the buyer he can leave the key under the mat. I won't be there. You sure you don't want to do a walkthrough? I already did one, she said. Years ago. Tasha paused, then quietly added, This was cleaner than I expected. Frances smiled faintly, because I planned it. After she hung up, she stood in her kitchen a long time. The light through the window had gone a kind of lavender gray. The wind carried the smell of burning leaves from somewhere nearby. Her favorite kind of evening. She poured herself a glass of water. Her phone buzzed again. No name, no number. Just one final message. We're not out yet. She read it once, then deleted it. And for the first time in weeks, maybe longer, she allowed herself a breath that went all the way down. The first envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Thin, windowed, official. Haley tossed it on the kitchen island like junk mail, not noticing the return address, County Treasurer's Office. The second came 2 days later, then another, and another. By the following Monday, there were 6 stacked in a crooked pile beneath the cordless phone they never used. 1 pink, 2 yellow, all warnings. Can you figure out what this is? Haley called from the kitchen, holding one up like a dirty sock. It says the property taxes are delinquent. Todd, half-dressed and nursing a hangover, muttered. Frances must have forgotten to pay. Haley blinked. She doesn't even live here anymore. She always paid him before, Todd said with a shrug. Insurance, too. I thought it came out of some joint account. Haley froze. What do you mean always paid them? Todd looked up slowly, said nothing. She turned and started ripping open envelopes. 2 towns away, Frances sat with Tasha at a corner cafe, sipping tea from a real mug and reviewing a checklist Tasha had printed out in 12-point font. Last 3 on the list, canceled and confirmed, Tasha said, ticking them off with her pen. Homeowner's insurance, property tax autopay, and the water account, all in your name, all officially terminated. Frances exhaled. Good. You know, Tasha added, if they'd just asked where the money was coming from, none of this would have lasted 6 months. Frances stirred her tea. They never wanted to know. Illusions are expensive. I just got tired of footing the bill. The internet post went up around midnight. Haley, face washed and lit only by the glow of her ring light, looked straight into her phone camera and pressed record. I don't usually post personal things, she began, voice falsely fragile. But I've learned the hard way that betrayal sometimes comes from where you least expect it. My mother, and I say that loosely, has decided to evict us from the home we made together. No warning, no decency, just paperwork and silence. I thought family meant something. She tagged local groups, the church, even an old PTA page from Julian's high school. By morning, the post had 36 shares and a handful of heart emojis, and one perfectly timed comment from Noreen. Some people lose homes, others return them. By noon, the replies shifted. Questions. Skepticism. Someone posted the county deed records with Frances's name still on them. Another asked why someone living in their house hadn't paid their own taxes. By nightfall, Haley had turned off commenting. Julian packed a duffel bag on the third day of shouting. He didn't announce it, just zipped it closed, slid it quietly down the stairs, and texted his friend Greg from the porch. Haley was mid-rant about character assassination. Todd was calling the tax office, then hanging up, then calling again. Each room vibrated with panic disguised as moral offense. Julian left without saying goodbye. He slept on Greg's couch that night and exhaled like he'd been underwater for weeks. Todd sat in the back of his truck the following afternoon, balancing his phone on one knee, glasses low on his nose. He had filled out every question on the personal loan application, like he was back in college faking an essay. Income, projected future assets, all of it. Denied. The screen didn't even give a reason, just a curt red. "We regret to inform you." He stared at it for a long time, then closed the app and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat like it had betrayed him too. Frances folded laundry in her new one-bedroom the next morning. Quiet, clean, paid off. A small desk in the corner now held her papers. Deed, tax receipts, copies of the cease and desist. She labeled every folder. Not out of spite, out of closure. She heard her phone buzz from the kitchen. One new notification. This time, it wasn't from a blocked number. It was from an account she recognized. Haley. The preview read, "I hope you're happy." Frances didn't open it. She powered off her phone and walked back to the dryer, her steps steady, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Something not quite a smile. Not yet. The banging started before sunrise. 3 hard knocks, then a pause, then 4 more, louder. Frances didn't flinch. She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, stirring oatmeal with one hand and steadying her mug with the other. Her robe was soft, slate gray. The light above the stove cast a quiet glow across the counters. Another knock. Longer this time. A fist, not a hand. Then shouting, "Frances, Mom, open the door." She didn't move. Out on the stoop, Haley's voice cracked. "You don't get to ignore me. You don't get to disappear like this is some movie you get to win." The porch camera caught everything. Frances had already silenced the chime. No need to make noise for what she already knew. Inside, the silence was sacred. The oatmeal thickened. The world turned. By 8 p.m., Julian had already texted. "Julian, she's on a rampage. Said you owe her an explanation." "Julian, follow-up. I told her the truth. This was never your house." Frances stared at the screen. She didn't type anything. She just pressed the message, held it for a second, and saved it. Then she walked to the attic stairs. The boxes were exactly where she'd left them, stacked, dusty, untouched. Frances opened the one labeled Spring 1999. Inside, the old Kodak prints, some still in their photo-developing sleeves. Julian's third-grade recital, Haley in braces, and a Gap hoodie 2 sizes too big. Todd grilling in the backyard with a beer and a smug grin that had aged poorly. There was a photo of her, too. Taken by someone else, blurred, off-center. She was setting a table. Her expression was unreadable even then. She packed the albums slowly, carefully, wrapped them in towels, taped the box shut. At noon, there was another knock. Gentler, measured. Frances didn't answer this one either, but she did peek through the side window. A floral arrangement sat on the stoop. Tall stems, marigolds, white lilies, something green and soft she couldn't name. She waited until the car pulled away. Bishop Clyde's Buick. Always the Buick. She brought the flowers in and opened the card. Some reckonings arrive with receipts. See, she left the arrangement on the hall table. Let the scent fill the space. Across town, Haley stood outside the buyer's office in borrowed heels and a coat she'd never quite returned to Frances. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Probably Todd asking what she was doing, but she ignored it. Inside, the receptionist looked at her like a stranger, not rudely, just blankly. "I'm not asking for anything big," Haley said. "Just 30 days, a little time to regroup. We have a kid, well, not a kid, but Julian. He's still transitioning." The receptionist smiled in that way people do when they've already decided it's not their problem. I'm sorry, Mr. Latham doesn't meet with former tenants. Everything goes through legal. Haley blinked. The door behind the receptionist opened briefly. A man stepped out, tall, late 40s, pressed slacks, Bluetooth in one ear. He gave Haley one glance. No recognition, no pity. Just that clean, efficient look of someone who only had time for contracts. Mr. Latham, Haley asked, stepping forward. He kept walking. I used to live in that house, she said, louder. You bought it out from under us. Latham turned halfway. I bought it from the legal owner. If that wasn't you, it's not my concern. He was gone before she could summon a response. Back at home, Frances's new home, she folded sweaters into plastic bins, labeled them, lined them up in rows. She was preparing to host a small Thanksgiving. Just Julian and maybe Tasha. She hadn't decided yet. The air felt lighter in here, honest. She glanced toward the front door. On the ground was a crumpled envelope. No stamp, just her name in Haley's handwriting, furious and shaky. Frances didn't pick it up. She let it sit there like the last word in an argument she refused to finish. That night, the porch camera caught Haley one last time, standing beneath the motion light, face streaked with tears and rage, whispering something no one would ever hear. Frances watched it play from her phone the next morning. Then she deleted it. Without saving, Frances never opened the email. The subject line, "Are you proud of this?" flashed across her lock screen around 6:14 a.m., time-stamped 3 hours after Haley had stood whispering on her porch like a curse too weak to stick. She didn't read the message, didn't need to. She tapped forward, typed Tasha's name, and added just 2 words. Use this. Then she powered down the phone and placed it face down in the drawer where she now kept all the things she no longer needed daily. Old keys, a silver cross from her mother's funeral, a faded copy of the will and testament she'd rewritten last spring. The next morning, Todd and Haley received the update. It arrived by courier, hand-delivered, signature required. Todd signed with a grunt, ripping open the packet with a steak knife, while Haley hovered behind him, arms crossed, her breath fast and short like she'd been sprinting in place all week. The first page was bad. The second was worse. It was legal, precise, and cold. Notice of accelerated eviction. Effective 6 days earlier than scheduled. Cause, harassment of legal property owner. Authorized under Clause 3B of the purchase contract. Enforced by the buyer's legal team and co-signed by Frances's attorney. Haley blinked at it like the words might rearrange themselves into mercy. She can't do this, she whispered. Todd reread the last paragraph. Then again. She already did. Julian carried his last box into Noreen's guest house by mid-afternoon. A real bed. Clean towels, air that didn't taste like secondhand resentment. The place smelled like lemon and wood polish, warm, lived in. Noreen had left a candle burning near the window, cedar and tobacco leaf. A stack of folded sheets waited on the foot of the bed. No lecture, no fuss, just a quiet kind of welcome. He texted Frances just once. Julian, I'm out. Her reply came an hour later. Good. Then, thank you for seeing it for what it was. That evening, Frances drove to the post office just before close. No one else in line. The clerk behind the counter recognized her from church potlucks and grocery store checkout lines. Forwarding address, he asked, polite. She slid over the form. Already filled. Already stamped. Effective immediately, she said. Her handwriting was crisp, slanted right, like it had learned balance the hard way. Back on Elmhurst Lane, the construction van arrived 2 full days before the final deadline. The buyer's contractors didn't wait. They didn't knock. They started work before breakfast. Siding, windows, the back deck first. Loud, unapologetic hammering. Todd stumbled outside in gym shorts, waving his arms like a man who still thought volume equaled authority. You're early, the crew chief didn't even glance up. We've got clearance. He pointed to a paper taped inside the front window. Todd hadn't noticed it. New owner. Renovation commencement. Immediate. Haley, still in pajama pants, came to the door with mascara smeared beneath her eyes. They're not supposed to. They can, Todd muttered. And they are. By late afternoon, the moving truck had arrived. The kind you rent when you're not sure where you're going, just that you can't stay. Haley watched as strangers lifted her couch, her armoire, the oversized mirror she'd insisted on mounting in the entryway. The one Frances had said was too much. It was all going into storage. No new lease yet, no backup plan, just plastic bins and rental blankets. When they reached the last piece of furniture, her grandmother's hope chest, Haley finally broke. It wasn't loud, not a tantrum, just a crack in her voice, a fold in her knees. She sat down on the brick steps and buried her face in her hands. One of the movers offered her a bottle of water. She didn't take it. Todd didn't sit beside her. He just walked inside, shut the door, and let the hinges do the talking. Frances stood at her kitchen counter, slicing apples for pie. The oven was already preheating. She'd invited Julian for dinner. Tasha might stop by. She didn't check the porch camera. She didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. Julian moved into his dorm 2 weeks early. No send-off, no goodbye. He'd told Haley it was for orientation housing, but she knew better. He didn't need an orientation. He needed oxygen. The campus was still half empty, just the hum of maintenance crews and the echo of his sneakers in the hallway. The dorm smelled faintly of new paint and detergent, a mix of beginnings and bleach. He unpacked slow, methodical, shirts, textbooks. A single framed photo of him and Frances from years back. He didn't bring any from the other house, not one. When he finished, he sat on the bare mattress edge and exhaled like someone had just handed him permission to exist. Across the room, his phone buzzed. Frances, tuition posted. You're clear for the semester. No emojis. No signature, just done. He typed back one line. Thank you. Frances didn't reply. She didn't need to. Frances paid his tuition directly through the university portal, the same way she'd handled every quiet responsibility before. Insurance, property taxes, repairs no one ever noticed. No announcement, no receipt left in a drawer, no check waived for praise. Just another transaction of love done cleanly, silently. Her spreadsheet closed with a soft click. Back on Elmhurst Lane, Haley was losing the public she thought she'd controlled. Her latest post, longer, angrier, more performative than before, sat at the top of her feed, accompanied by a filtered selfie that didn't hide the exhaustion. Some people preach grace and family, but when money's involved, they show their true colors. My own mother made us homeless. Think about that next time you post about forgiveness. The comments started friendly, people she hadn't talked to in years dropping heart emojis or you deserve better messages. But by evening, the thread turned. Someone posted a screenshot of the county record again. Someone else quoted Noreen's old comment. Some people lose homes, others return them, then silence. The kind that made even Haley stop refreshing. Todd didn't hold back. I told you to read the damn papers, he said, pacing the kitchen like a man looking for a target. All this talk about how she stole it. She didn't steal anything. You just didn't bother checking who owned what. Haley slammed a cabinet door. You were in it too. I didn't sign her name on half the bills. No. You just drank her money and called it teamwork. Todd grabbed his keys and left before she could find a new word sharp enough to throw. The slam of the front door shook dust off the window blinds. Frances spent that same evening back at the house she'd first bought on her own, the one she'd rented out years ago when life got busy and pride got expensive. It was smaller than she remembered, humbler, a narrow porch, chipped blue trim, a backyard that needed mowing, but the bones were good, and it was hers. When she unlocked the front door, the hinges moaned like they recognized her. She stepped inside. The air was stale, but familiar, the scent of old cedar and stored summers. Dust motes floated through a slant of sunlight like slow confetti. She stood still for a long minute, hand resting on the doorknob, letting the quiet fill her chest. Her piece had shape now. 4 walls, 1 name on the deed, and not a single debt to anyone. An hour later, a soft knock. Not sharp, not desperate. Noreen stood there holding a pie and a chilled bottle of cider in a brown paper bag. I figured you'd be too proud to invite anyone over, she said, smiling. So I just came anyway. Frances laughed, quiet, low. You know me too well. I know you finally look like you can sleep, Noreen said. That's progress. They ate at the small kitchen table, 2 forks, 1 plate between them, steam rising off the pie like forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken. Noreen poured cider into mismatched mugs. To endings, she said, lifting hers. Frances paused. And to not reopening doors that stay shut. They clinked the mugs. Later that night, after Noreen left, Frances walked to the front window. Outside, the street was dark and quiet, save for a single car idling under the streetlight. White, older model, unfamiliar. Its headlights cut briefly across her lawn before flicking off. Frances didn't move, didn't reach for her phone, just watched. The car lingered, then pulled away, slow, deliberate. She waited until its taillights disappeared around the corner before locking every door, every window. The peace was real, but it wasn't guaranteed. The envelope was thick and embossed, trimmed with cheap gold foil. Frances didn't even open it. She didn't need to. The font was always the same, the color scheme always beige. That annual invitation to the family autumn gathering, once called a reunion, before too many people stopped reuniting. She walked it straight to the fireplace. No fanfare, no hesitation. The flame caught fast, curling the edges inward until the words melted into ash. No RSVP. No regrets. 3 days later, her landline rang, a sound that hadn't meant much in years. She answered on the 3rd ring, half expecting a robocall. It was Bishop Clyde's voice, soft but solid. Just leaving this to say, we missed your presence, but understood your absence. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The message beeped to an end, and Frances stood for a long while in the middle of the kitchen, one hand still on the receiver, the other wrapped around her mug. At the gathering, Haley arrived late, overdressed. She floated through the crowd with practiced ease, air kissing, hugging too hard, talking louder than necessary, laughing too brightly, pretending. She never mentioned the house, never brought up Frances. Never acknowledged the sharp hush that followed her from table to table. She talked about new opportunities, claimed to be working on something big, talked about her podcast, said the phrase building my platform twice in the same sentence. But the eyes in the room didn't meet hers the way they used to. Sympathy had its shelf life. Todd stayed in the background, nursing a beer like it owed him something. His face was tight, drained of its usual smugness. He barely spoke. When someone asked where they were living now, Haley gave a too loud laugh and waved the question off like smoke. Todd just stared into his drink. That morning, before any of that unfolded, Frances had gotten a call. She saw Julian's name light up on her phone, and something in her stomach warmed, not just relief, something like rightness. He didn't wait long. Want to get lunch instead? Frances smiled. Let me grab my coat. The diner was halfway between the campus and her neighborhood, a small square building with chipped white paint and a neon sign that buzzed like it had secrets. Inside, it smelled like bacon grease and buttered toast. The booths were cracked, the coffee was strong, and nobody cared about anything except the pie. They slid into a booth near the window. Julian had already ordered fries. Frances went with chicken salad and a side of something fried she didn't name. They didn't talk about Haley, or Todd, or paperwork, or evictions. They talked about his classes, his roommate's strange habit of ironing socks, a professor who wore flip-flops in October, the way Frances's new neighborhood was quiet enough to hear her own thoughts again. They laughed, not the awkward kind, the good kind, like bricks being lifted off a roof, one by one. Julian dipped a fry in ranch, then looked up. I saw Haley post a picture from the reunion. Frances didn't blink. Was I tagged? No, he said. You were edited out. She nodded. Sounds about right. Julian paused. I used to think peace meant everyone getting along. And now? He shrugged. Now I think it means not bleeding for people who wouldn't do the same. Frances reached for her coffee. Welcome to adulthood. Back at the gathering, someone asked Haley if Frances would be coming by later. She smiled with all her teeth. Oh, I think she's just resting. You know how it is. She didn't notice Noreen standing by the cider table, watching her. Quiet, steady, holding her paper cup like a verdict. When Julian dropped Frances off at home, the street was calm. The leaves had started to go gold along the edges, like the world was easing into a kind of earned rest. Julian got out and walked her to the porch. He didn't have to, but he did. Frances paused at the door. "Your room's always here, you know, if the dorm ever feels too small." Julian smiled. "Thanks, but I think I'm right where I need to be." He turned to go, but something made him stop. "You ever think about going back? Just to see?" Frances shook her head. "I don't go where I'm only remembered for staying too long." Inside, the pie from Noreen sat cooling on the counter, still warm, still untouched. Frances sliced it, poured herself a cup of cider, and stepped out onto the back porch, just as the wind shifted and brought the sound of distant music from someone's backyard party a few streets over. She sat down, exhaled, and somewhere far off, on the edge of things, an engine rumbled. Not close, not threatening, but still circling, still watching. Frances never told anyone what she planned to do with the money, not even Julian. It cleared into her account on a Thursday mid-morning. The screen lit up, the sum clean and final. She stared at it just long enough to feel nothing about it at all. Then she shut the laptop, made herself a sandwich, and started the transfer. The organization was small, local. Women's transitional housing on the east side. Nothing fancy, but steady, reliable. The kind of place you hoped you'd never need but were damn grateful existed when you did. She didn't include a letter, no request for recognition. Just wired the funds in full with the subject line, "For something that stays warm." 2 months later, a room was added to the second floor of the shelter. Fresh drywall, new lighting, comfortable chairs, a small bookshelf stocked with donated paperbacks, some new, some bent at the spine with stories already lived in. A plaque hung beside the doorway. No spotlight, no unveiling. The Frances Wyatt Quiet Room. For when silence is a gift, not a sentence. It made the local newsletter, but not the paper. Frances never read the article. She didn't need to. Julian learned about it during winter break, the way most real things surface, quietly. He'd been volunteering a few days a week, helping organize donations and restock hygiene kits. The staff liked him. He didn't talk too much, and he always stayed late without being asked. One afternoon, he brought up a box of children's books and paused in front of the plaque. He read it once, then again. "Is that who I think it is?" he asked the volunteer coordinator. She looked over and smiled. "Yep, kind woman. Told us not to make a fuss." Julian didn't say anything else. Just walked into the room and set the books down. Sat in one of the chairs. Let the stillness settle around him. He didn't tell Haley, or Todd. He didn't even text Frances. Some things didn't need to circle back to people who had only ever held mirrors up to themselves. Frances spent that morning at her kitchen table, working through the Wednesday crossword, with her reading glasses perched low on her nose and a pencil tapping softly against her mug. Outside the window, the hummingbird feeders swayed slightly in the wind. 2 of them had returned early this year, iridescent and fast, wings moving too quick for bitterness to catch. She watched them until they disappeared, then turned back to 10 down, 5 letters, unbothered. She wrote in. Still. Later that evening, Noreen stopped by with a tin of ginger snaps and her usual way of not asking permission. She settled on the porch swing and popped the lid like it was tradition. "Place is looking less like a fortress," she said. Frances gave a half smile. "I changed the locks, not the foundation." Noreen crunched into a cookie. "Saw the plaque." Frances raised a brow. Noreen shrugged. "I know people. And I know when someone rewrites their own ending." There was a pause. Then she said it, soft but firm, like a declaration that had earned the right to land. "You didn't get revenge, Frances. You got restored." Frances didn't answer right away. She reached into the tin, pulled out a cookie, and broke it in half. "Good," she said finally. Revenge would have made them unforgettable. Inside the house, the answering machine blinked once. Frances didn't check it. Outside, the feeder swayed again. The birds returned. And far off at the edge of the property, a car engine started. This time, she didn't look up. It arrived 2 days before Christmas. No return address, no handwriting she recognized. Just a cream envelope with her name printed too neatly in the center, like whoever sent it had used a ruler. Frances stood at the mailbox for a long moment, envelope in one hand, a bag of birdseed in the other. Then she turned, walked back up the porch, stopped at the recycling bin beside the door, lifted the lid, dropped the card in, closed it, didn't blink. That afternoon, she unpacked her box of Christmas decorations, downsized last year, when she'd still been living inside someone else's idea of what her life should look like. The tree was small now, artificial, about 3 feet tall with soft white lights that came already strung. She clicked the switch and watched it glow. One by one, she added what mattered. The cinnamon stick angel Julian had made in 2nd grade, a faded snowman ornament with 2001 etched on the back, a single glass bird her mother had given her before the decline began. Each piece went on like punctuation, nothing loud, just the right kind of quiet. When she finished, she stepped back. No guilt, no second thoughts, just joy. At sunset, Bishop Clyde arrived in his brown wool coat, scarf crooked, gloves tucked into one pocket like he was only half committed to winter. He knocked once, then let himself in. "You better not have laced those ginger snaps with bourbon again," Frances said from the kitchen, smiling without looking up. "Wouldn't waste the bourbon on cookies," he said, setting down a bright red poinsettia on her hall table. "That's for the porch, or the compost bin, depending on your mood." She chuckled. He pulled a candy cane from his coat pocket and handed it to her like it was a check. "For your troubles," he said. "No expiration." Meanwhile, across town, Todd sat on the edge of a borrowed futon in a basement apartment that smelled like old carpet and microwave popcorn. He was going down the list one name at a time. Unfriend, 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 cousins, church acquaintances, even Bishop Clyde, though he hesitated for a moment on that one before clicking. He called it taking control. Really, it was retreat. Even the people who hadn't said anything, especially them, felt like traitors now. Haley logged off entirely. She'd deleted the app first, then the account, then told herself it was for mental health, when really it was just exhaustion. The feeds were too quiet. Too many pictures of pies Frances had once taught her how to make. Too many photos of Julian smiling without her in them. She stared at the deactivation screen for 10 minutes before tapping confirm. Then opened a bottle of wine and drank it in the bathroom with the shower running just to drown out the silence. Back on Frances's street, the lights on her porch glowed warm against the dark. No inflatables, no music, just a quiet welcome. Inside, she sat by the tree with scissors and ribbon, wrapping one gift with careful fingers. It was flat, rectangular, tissue papered, tied with string. No tag. She didn't need one. It was for Julian. Inside, a photograph, laminated now, preserved. It showed the two of them in the backyard garden. Julian was about 6, covered in dirt, missing a tooth, holding a carrot like it was a trophy. Frances had her arm around him. They both looked surprised the camera had caught the moment. Neither was looking directly at it. They didn't have to. When she finished wrapping, she turned off all the lights except the ones on the tree. The house held the kind of stillness that only came when no one expected anything of you anymore. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She didn't check it. Instead, she walked to the window. A car sat across the street. Headlights off. Again. Julian hadn't planned on showing it to her. The essay was for a writing seminar, something he'd scribbled out over 3 cups of coffee and a memory he didn't expect to carry as much weight as it did. But when the professor read it aloud, uncredited, and the class fell silent at the last line, he realized it wasn't just personal, it was true. He emailed it to Frances on a Wednesday night, subject line blank. No note, no signature. She opened it the next morning, still in her robe, crossword half finished. The weight of generosity. It doesn't land all at once. It builds quietly, like snow, like silence. I used to think power looked like presence, but now I know it often looks like someone leaving the door unlocked behind them, even when they're not welcome inside. I owe my foundation to a woman who never raised her voice, only her expectations. When people talk about inheritance, they talk about things. I was given time, safety, a version of love that expected nothing back. That kind of giving is heavy, and it holds. Frances read it twice. The third time, she stopped at the line about inheritance and sat very still. Her glasses tipped low, eyes damp but unblinking. She reached for a tissue, but didn't use it. Just sat with the weight of the page. When she finally looked away, the feeder outside was empty. The birds had come and gone while she was still. That weekend, she sent a transfer. Not through an app. Not through anything Julian would see on his phone immediately. It went straight into the university's account. His spring semester covered. His books prepaid. A housing stipend already waiting in his name. She didn't mention it. Didn't attach a card. The email confirmation arrived silently. She archived it without reading. Julian found out the next time he checked his Bursar account. Balance, $0. A note at the bottom. Payment received. Source, private benefactor. He didn't have to ask. Across town, Haley found out a different way. She was scrolling through an old thread on Julian's student forum, half spying, half reminiscing, when she saw the post. To whoever paid off my tuition, thank you. May I never forget the lesson and the cost. She read it 3 times, her stomach a knot of heat and shame. That night, she called him. The line rang and rang. When it finally picked up, it was his voicemail. Still the same recording from years ago, awkward, polite, teenager pitched. She hung up, then tried again. Left a message this time. Julian, I hope you know there are 2 sides to every story. I know she's been generous, but family is more than money. I'm still your mother. The next morning, she tried texting. It bounced back. Number no longer accepting messages from this contact. Blocked. She stared at the screen like it had hit her. Maybe it had. Noreen stopped by that afternoon with spiced tea and a look that knew too much. Frances didn't pretend not to know what it was about. She found out, Noreen asked, sipping from her travel mug. She did. What did she do? Tried guilt. And Julian? Frances leaned back in her chair, the afternoon sun catching her shoulder in gold. He chose truth. Noreen gave a slow nod. And you? Frances smiled faintly. I chose distance. That evening, Julian texted. Got the confirmation. I know it was you. Thank you for every quiet thing. Frances typed, then deleted, then typed again. Keep the weight. It builds the strongest bones. She hit send, then turned off the phone. Across the street, a car sat again. Same model, same dark windows. But this time, as she stood by the curtain, Frances watched the passenger side door open. Just for a moment. Just enough for a shadow to step out, lean on the frame, and look up. Not a wave, not a threat. Just the outline of someone who hadn't learned how to disappear. Frances didn't move. She reached for the light switch beside the window and flipped it off. The old house looked nothing like it used to. Fresh siding, new shutters, a wraparound porch with string lights already hung, twinkling even in daylight. The flower beds had been cleared out and replanted, low-maintenance perennials, nothing dramatic. The mailbox had been replaced too. No dent in the door, no sign of long-forgotten battles. Just a clean suburban story beginning again. Frances passed by slowly, hands steady on the wheel. She didn't pull over. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement. A little girl on the lawn, laughing, chasing a wind-blown balloon. Her mother followed with a juice pouch and a towel. No connection, no resemblance, no ghosts. Frances didn't smile, but something in her shoulders settled. The house was no longer theirs. Not Haley's, not Todd's, not anyone's in that lineage. The title had turned over. The rooms had been scrubbed clean. History was replaced by square footage and granite countertops. The realtor's listing no longer appeared in her saved searches. It belonged to strangers now. She was glad. Haley signed the lease on a 2-bedroom condo next to a highway on-ramp. You could hear traffic even with the windows shut. The walls hummed like a dull memory. The unit was staged when she saw it. All white couches and fake ferns. She signed fast. No negotiation. The real estate agent never asked why she was moving. Just scanned the paperwork, took the deposit, and slid the keys across the table. By move-in day, the hallway smelled like old paint and someone else's takeout. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was weightless, like a room with nothing on the shelves. Todd took a new job in the next county, something with sales, commission-based. He told people it was a pivot, as if failure was just another rebranding. He stopped going to church, stopped returning texts from old friends. When someone from the family circle posted a memory photo from 2 years ago, he didn't like it. He just stared at it for a long time before muttering. None of it meant anything to an empty room. Frances didn't talk about the house anymore. It wasn't part of her vocabulary now. She cooked in her small kitchen, cleaned the baseboards when no one was looking. She added a new hummingbird feeder, blue glass shaped like a bell. She read novels, watered her porch plants, let herself forget dates on purpose. She ran into Noreen outside the post office, both women holding paper bags like old habits. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Noreen asked, her voice calm but pointed. Frances didn't pretend. "I drove by." And Frances shrugged. "They've painted over the years." Noreen tilted her head. "No one's mocking you now." Frances turned, the sun catching her glasses. "They never mocked me," she said. "They mocked what they feared." There was no pride in it, just truth, dry and clean. That evening, Frances made tea and opened her windows. The breeze carried no sounds of memory, just a neighbor's wind chime and a faint radio. 2 houses over playing something older than either of them. The phone didn't ring, the lights stayed off across the street. For the first time in months, there was no car idling at the curb. No silhouette in the shadows. Frances sat by the window, book in her lap, tea cooling beside her. She didn't need to reread the chapter. She'd already lived it. But just as she reached to close the curtain for the night, her doorbell rang. Once, then silence. Julian's campus apartment sat on the second floor of a weathered brick building just off a quiet side street, lined with bare trees and scattered bike locks. No name on the buzzer, just the number, 2B. Frances knocked once. The door opened almost instantly. "Hey," Julian said. No explanation, no fuss. The space was warm in that way that comes from being lived in, not decorated. Books were stacked along the windowsill and beside the couch. The jazz station played softly from a Bluetooth speaker near the kitchen sink. Coltrane, probably, or someone who owed him something. He'd made pasta, bowls already set on the table. A garlic smell clung to the air. Frances stepped inside and smiled. "You've been practicing," Julian shrugged. "I didn't want to burn the first real dinner I cooked for you." They sat, ate, no big talk. No clearing of throats or digging up of ghosts. Just bites, nods, refills. A passing comment about the professor who always forgot his coffee on the podium. Laughter over a neighbor who practiced tuba at odd hours. Peace, not the loud, triumphant kind. The quiet, faithful kind that took years to build and didn't need witnesses. After they cleared the dishes, Frances stood and reached for the bag she'd left by the door. "I brought something." Julian looked up. She unfolded the quilt slowly, smoothing it out over the back of his worn couch. Patches of old flannel, t-shirts, faded denim. A strip from the curtain in his childhood bedroom. The corner of a hoodie he'd outgrown in 9th grade. He touched the edge of it like it might dissolve. "You made this?" "I started it years ago," she said. "Didn't finish until last month." He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Frances placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got rooms now," she said quietly. "Don't forget where the walls came from." When she left, he stood in the doorway watching until her car disappeared down the street. Back home, the porch light clicked on at dusk, as if to welcome her back. Frances stepped into the house, kicked off her shoes, and set her keys in the bowl with the rhythm of ritual. She lit a candle, lavender and cedar, and carried it to the kitchen, where the last cup of tea she hadn't finished from earlier still sat in the sink. She poured herself a fresh one. Let it steep. Let it settle. The phone rang. She answered on the second ring. "Miss Frances," Bishop Clyde's voice said. Warm, worn, familiar. "You did good." She closed her eyes. One hand on the warm ceramic mug. "You did it the quiet way," he added. "That's the kind that lasts." She didn't say anything at first. Then, "Some things don't need to echo to stick." Clyde chuckled low in his throat. "Amen to that." They hung up a few minutes later. No big ending, just a click. A kind of stillness that made room for air. Frances stood in the kitchen, took a long sip. Watched the candle flame sway against the window, Then, for the first time, she said it out loud. Not to anyone, just into the room. At the family reunion, my daughter's husband said she really should learn when to stay home, and my daughter laughed with him. She paused, took another sip. They stopped laughing when I sold the home they were living in, and she smiled, not out of revenge, out of memory, out of choosing what to keep and what to never carry again.